All right. We're on verse 30 of 1 Corinthians 11. And it's continuing, been talking about the Lord's Supper. Okay. So, Jerry, you want to go first or second?
Yeah, I'll go first. Dia, tuto, in, humin, poloi, asthenes, kai, arostoi, kai, koimontai, ikanoi. And I put, because of this, among you many are weak and ill, and many are, well, I put fallen to sleep or spiritually dead, or lulled to sleep. I couldn't decide which one I wanted.
So, King James American Standard says not a few sleep, or many sleep, and not a few, the American Standard reads. So there's a bunch of them that are asleep. I think that's spiritually asleep. I don't think they're sleeping like you sleep at, pardon me, hiccup, I'm sorry, at night. So I think it's a figure of speech for, well, that's the way I interpret it.
That would also apply to the weak too, right?
Yeah. I think the weak, and that's the word for weak or feeble or infirm. It could indicate even sickness, but probably in this context, it's probably just they're spiritually weak. They haven't grown up, haven't exercised their senses to discern good and evil.
It's kind of a progressive thing. They're weak, now they're sick, now they're dead. They're asleep.
Not a few, the American Standard reads. It's it's in a bad sense, and it's a warning concerning not discerning the Lord's body while taking the Lord's Supper. So this is not normal sleep. It's this most likely a reference to death. I think it might be that they're asleep spiritually and spiritually dead, because death is sometimes, as a figure of speech, called sleep. And so it could be physical death, but I don't think so. I had an elder friend that thought that people were dying because they were wrongly partaking the Lord's Supper, and he was using Acts 5 from it.
Wow.
And a nice cigar. And I told him, I said, I can't rule that out, but I don't think that's what's happening here.
No, I think it's just showing the progressing. There's some of them that are already weak, and then there's some already past that point, and they're ill actually, and then some of them are past that point, and they've actually just gone to seed.
Yeah. But I think
But they can come back.
that elder I'm talking about, I won't call his name, but he's dead now. And so, but he was a good man, but there was I didn't think he was right on that interpretation.
Sometimes you get an idea in your head though, and it's hard to shake it.
I don't think it's probably not spiritual death, it could be physical death. I pointed out as a warning against failure, saints by the holy. But this is probably because they're already weak spiritually, so they're weak and sickly and not a few sleep. I think they're spiritually asleep, is what they are. That's Jerry's saying. Because for this cause, many among you are weak and sickly and not a few sleep. I went ahead like the American Standard pretty much. Right. Yes, could you do verse 31?
Yes. E de etos dig nomen uk on ikrin o mitha. For if ourselves we were not judging, we would not come under judgment. That doesn't say right. For if we were judging not ourselves, we would come under judgment.
Or if we would judge ourselves, we should not be judged. That's how the American Standard King James read.
Yeah, trying to get that not in the right place.
Right.
And I kind of added word, I guess, to it. Well, I put them in where I know I had them. For if we examine ourselves, we may not be brought into judgment. And I wanted that because, why? Not to be brought into, oh,
Would we do something with on, make that like indeed or certainly? We would not come under judgment? If we were judging ourselves, we indeed would not come under judgment.
On,
Yeah,
on is an intranslatable word, and it makes it contingent upon something in the context, always does.
Mhm.
Whatever it is, it's contingent.
so there's not a good way to put that.
No, and in fact, let me get out of the text and we'll get into my file.
So there's not a word you would probably put as a placeholder there for that?
No,
Okay.
none of the translators have one for it. They just say it's untranslatable.
the concept is sort of if, again, but still you can kind of get the idea of there being something that may happen.
I'll go back to the top. Okay. Page up. All right.
You say it's contingent. I was thinking it made it definite or something.
I think it's an iffy type of thing.
Oh, it is. It applies down.
I've got Metzger, Dana Manny, and some other sources. It's a particle. It's a kind of a catch-all, or it's words that are kind of, they're not nouns or pronouns or whatever, but we call it a particle, not a participle, but a particle. The particle on implies doubt or indefiniteness. Its very presence in a sentence indicates lack of certainty on the part of the one using it. It warns us not to take at full face value what the other words may imply. See, and that would fit in with my interpretation of these right here. But remember that this word, which implies uncertainty, is used with the moods of uncertainty. We're far advanced in proper understanding of it. The moods of uncertainty would be subjunctive, optative, and imperative mood. It's used with those moods.
I had it backwards. I thought it made it definite, but it's
And
one of the
Metzger
other-
says it's an untranslatable word, the effect of which is to make a statement contingent, which would otherwise be definite. Okay. And of course, Thayer will say basically the same thing. I just put these in here. Any questions about that?
No, I had it in mind the other way, that the on helps make it definite, but it's the opposite.
Yeah.
When I'm translating, I always put the word if above it so that I can keep a track of it.
Yeah.
I don't put the word if in my deal, but
Yeah.
that's how I keep track of the word.
But Metzger says untranslatable word. They don't translate it. What you'll find if you have Strong's Concordance, it'll be a backwards. I think where on is there, it'll have parentheses backwards, just against, so that they're showing nothing inside there.
Okay.
Two parentheses backwards to one another.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, I'll put it on the screen here, what I'm talking about here, for the sake of the readers, the hearers. So we'll have parentheses like this and like that. I think Strong's, that's how they'll do it. Okay?
And that's to put a placeholder. Don't put a word here.
Yeah. That's what we'll see in Strong's Concordance.
Okay.
Right. Now, a little hint for you. This word's in Acts 8, 239.
Oh.
Okay. All right, we're gonna get off into that. Go back to our, go back, 1 Corinthians, start sharing. Now we're back to it. All right. Now, He should not be judged.
And I put examine because that's what really kind of examining yourself so that you're not brought into judgment.
It's active voice, and it's in perfect tense. So it's not just one time, it's continually doing this. We have to always keep on being careful that we are careful in the Lord's Supper. That's what I think he's telling us. We got to be careful that we're always discerning and not let our mind drift away when we're taking the Lord's Supper. And so we discern ourselves, and that's to make a distinction or to learn to discriminate. And so I'm discriminating between my actions with regard to the Lord's Supper and my actions with regard to other things. So if I've taken the fruit juice, grape juice at the Lord's Supper, it's different than drinking some grape juice for my breakfast. I don't think the same way. That's the way I look at it. And if I were to eat unleavened bread and crackers, but we eat like saltine crackers are basically unleavened bread, but they have salt on them, which won't fully fit our Lord's Supper. But they're similar. And so, but when I'm taking them, it's different than when I'm taking the Lord's Supper. So I distinguish, I discern, draw a distinction. Okay? That's what in the middle of the screen up here we can see it, to separate and make a distinction. So I make a distinction between that. And like I say, when I'm taking that grape juice in the Lord's Supper, it is, I make a distinction between it and drinking grape juice with my breakfast or with one of my other meals. Okay, that makes sense what I'm saying? Any question there? All right. I think here we see the apostle instructed the Corinthians to continually, that's imperfect, continuously, in perfect tense, discern or examine themselves to be certain that they do not partake of themselves in an unworthy manner. Verse 29 on Zeos. And the os ending, omega sigma ending, is an adverb of manner. And so it's an unworthy manner. It's an adverb of manner. I think the King James may say unworthily or something like that, which that's fine. That's a good translation. ly verbs are adverbs of manner. So the King James is correct there. I don't know what some of the other translations read, but probably about the same. Now we have, pneumatha is in the imperfect tense. Paul is saying that they and we should continue to discern every time we partake of the Lord's Supper. I think this means we just keep on doing it. I try to make my mind get everything else out of my mind. I try to get everything else out of my mind. Any questions or comments? All right. Again, I go back to Leviticus 10. I think that in Leviticus 10, Nadab and Abihu did not distinguish between the holy and the common, profane. Something that's profane is not necessarily wrong, right? My car out there is profane. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just an old car. It's just, but it's not a holy car. There's nothing holy about it. It's my car, but it's not holy. But there are things that are holy, and that what God has set aside. I translated for, if we are discerning ourselves, we should not be judged. And I put by the Lord in italics.
Yeah, I use the word examining just because it's so much easier for people to explain to people what you're talking about.
I might need to put a footnote in, just put footnote examining. Okay, I'll try to remember to do.
But then, because people will take that and say, "Well, I've examined myself, and I'm just not worthy to take it." No. You know, you've done that too for people. They've just missed the point. You know?
All right, I forgot.
They forget to read 29.
Jerry's next.
Okay.
And it's 32.
Yes, please.
Krino menoi, de hupo, kuyu, paidu omintha, hina, me, sun to, cosmo, kara, krith, thoman. And I got extra stuff on this one. But, let's see, I think I made that middle. But in examining ourselves, we be admonished by the Lord so that we might not be condemned with the world.
I went ahead with passive voice.
Well, I also had it
I
passive,
like your middle voice.
but if I made it passive also, but being examined by the Lord and being admonished so that we might not be condemned with the world. I did it both ways, but my leaning was for the middle.
I think what I need to do is I need to footnote it and give the middle voice.
I didn't think of that. I've never heard it that way. With the middle.
But it fits,
It
it is
does.
the middle passive form, but I don't know
It
which
does.
it is.
Yeah,
And it will fit the middle voice with the verse just before it.
it does.
It's the
Wow.
middle voice. And I had my mind set on passive voice, but I like your middle.
Well, yeah, because
Definitely what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it in my notes, I'm gonna footnote it as or, but that way the reader can make his own choice. But it does fit the prior verse real well.
Mhm.
Now we're chasing, now that's middle passive.
Application
That's
is admonished.
passive.
And that's what we're doing. We're letting the Lord chasten us or admonish us by examining ourselves according to his word.
And that chastening is from paiduo, which is to train a child. So we're his children and we're being trained. That's the way I see it. Sometimes God chastens us, as in Hebrews, with allowing troubles to come upon us, and we can become stronger. Okay. Any questions? Chastening is different than punishment. It entails instruction. That's the difference in the two. There's always instruction. Some of the Lord's chastening on the screen up here may be that he allows us to suffer for our own sins. And that'll chasten us.
He did over and over and over with the children of Israel.
Yeah. Some of the Lord's chastening maybe it allows us to suffer for the sins of others. That may chasten us as well. Because we're going to learn someone else does something wrong to me. If I have what I call the golden rule, and what's generally called the golden rule in my thinking, then I'll say, I don't want that to happen to somebody else. So if someone steals my car, I'm not going to steal anybody else's car because I know what it feels like. And of course, I know God told me not to, but that's none of the reason to motivate me not to steal their car or not to do anything to them. That if they do something bad to me, not to return it. That makes sense. So I think that right there also, we observe the suffering caused by the sins of others, maybe sometimes even suffering inflicted upon us. But we're like Stephen and the Lord, we don't turn it upon and curse them. We want them to become Christians. That we may not be condemned. Now, not is may, not ooh, right? So what it does, the word be condemned is subjunctive mood. That's why we have may here. May won't go, ooh won't go with the subjunctive. And so there's a possibility we might not be condemned if we'll do this.
Yeah, in this one area, I mean, there's other things. So, just because you do this doesn't mean you will not be condemned, because you might be condemned for something else.
Well, I think he's in the condemnation is in this context is a condemnation for taking the Lord's Supper wrong. We don't want to stretch something like this into widespread. I could partake of the Lord's Supper properly and do something else that's wrong. We won't be condemned with the world. So the world stands condemned, worldly people. Why? Because they don't discern between what's holy and profane. And again, something that's profane is just common. There's nothing wrong with it. I think apple juice is a profane drink, just a common drink. But I certainly wouldn't try to use it on the Lord's Supper. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? Because grape juice of the grape is used, and fruit of the vine, I believe is the term always used. And the vine always is the grapevine, and in that context. So I would say apple juice is good, something good to drink. I like it. But tomato juice is okay. I used to drink V8 quite a lot, but I'm not going to put that on Lord's Supper.
We almost once had some pear and apple juice on the Lord's Supper because Judy wasn't paying attention when she bought and she didn't buy the 100%. Somebody had put the bottle that looked exactly like the other bottle on the shelf. So she reached up and grabbed the bottle and she brought it up here. Then she looked at it and fortunately she found enough regular to use it, but it was drink. It was not juice.
We made the mistake on Luke once too. And we like, wait a minute, it looked just the same.
Yeah.
We saw drink and it had all kinds of other things like apple juice was in it.
When I was in Russia, you know how they did theirs? They took raisins, and those are dried grapes, and they put them in water and boiled them and got the juice out of them. And so we drank raisin juice, what we drank, which was grape juice.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we had over there. And because they couldn't get grape juice, the only grape juice they could get had alcohol in it.
Yeah.
And they'd get wine, but the brethren said, we don't want to drink wine. We don't want anything to do with it. So, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I'd agree with them. I thought they were just fine what they were doing.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? You can take grape juice and boil it down to like it's a paste and store it, and then mix it with water and kind of stir it up, mix it with water, maybe heat it up a little, and you get it almost tastes like regular grape juice when you get to it.
You can boil the alcohol out of wine too, but you still get that ugly green flavor.
All right. The world now, that's probably a synecdoche for worldly people. They don't discern between what's holy and profane. I think that's the problem here in verses 17 to 34. All right. So let's go on now. Who had last?
That's my turn. I'll take it.
33, please.
Hostia doifoi moi sun orkominoi ace to bagin alalelos ek dek e sethe. So then, my brothers, coming together, wait for one another to eat in order to eat.
So in the process of coming together, I might have it that way.
In the process of
Because it's a participle, and so it's a subjunctive. It's not a participle. I thought it was.
Well, the coming together says it's
Coming together.
present participle, middle or passive.
Okay. I thought it was like a participle for me.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well, yeah, it has the in coming. It's where they try to put the participle.
And
in.
coming together to eat. Eis to phagain is with the purpose clause. So the purpose was to eat what?
The Lord's Supper.
The Lord's Supper. And this improperly interpreted to mean that the only reason for assembling was to eat the Lord's Supper. But I think what he's singling out for us here is something that's kind of important. He says, this assembly is an assembly where the Lord's Supper is eaten. Other times when they come together, like on Thursday or Wednesday or other times, it's not for the purpose of the Lord's Supper because it was on the first day of the week. And so that's why he singles this out, not because it's more important than the other aspects of it, but because this is an assembly where the Lord's Supper is partaken of. And other times when they come together, they wouldn't necessarily partake of the Lord's Supper, like Thursday night or Friday or Monday or whatever. Does that make sense?
It does. I've heard others kind of take the point of view that the Lord's Supper is the most important, and they would rearrange the auditorium to make that the focus, or try to arrange the order. I didn't really see anything wrong with having that as a focus.
I'm not going to get in a fuss with them.
Right.
And I'm not going to split the church over that, but I think all 5 acts of worship are important.
Yeah, I think your perspective there is good. I like it.
One of the purposes of the first day of the week was to break bread, Acts 20 and verse 7. Gathered to break bread, see, Acts 20, verse 7. So that was an assembly that occurred on the first day of the week, and that one of the purposes of that assembly was to break bread. So that implies that other assemblies might not have been for the purpose of breaking bread. See, on other days, for example. And that fits in with our view that we should take the Lord's Supper only on the first day of the week. Any questions there? Boy, he preached till midnight. Another, let me get back here. Another purpose of church to come together was to receive a report on the work of the church. Possibly not the first day of the week. It's Acts 14, verses 25 to 27. Because there were various purposes for the church to come together, Paul singled out the purpose of this assembly. It was to break bread, which was only done on the first day of the week. Now, could the church assemble on the first day of the week for other purposes than to break bread or to have a contribution? Acts 1 Corinthians 16, I believe so. All right. And so the church could assemble on the first day of the week for other purposes.
As long as you did that too.
Yeah, but we've got to do this, and we need to do the contribution as well. Right? Could it engage in other acts of worship during that assembly, such as pray and sing psalms and study God's word? I believe we could. And we could assemble, the church could assemble for a prayer for a brother in prison in Acts 12:5 and so forth, okay?
One of the things that might cause people to think that maybe not just the first day of the week is because it was not initiated on the first day of the week. It was initiated like on a Friday.
Yeah.
But that was a totally different thing, but somebody could use that as an excuse to think, well, you know, like it was, and maybe it was like Thursday evening.
But he says, as often as you do this in remembrance of me.
Yeah.
So we see it being done on the first day of the week. We know it was done on the first day of the week. The Bible explicitly tells us that.
Mm-hmm.
So Thursday is not the only day it could be done, even if you made that argument, because we do have an example that it did it on the first day.
Yeah,
And we don't
and that's
have
what I would
any
point out to
example
somebody
that
who
it
would
did
use
any other
that,
day than the first day.
the fact that it was initiated on another day other than the first day. I would use that as, yeah, but that doesn't matter because the Bible tells us, and it was initiated under the Old Testament, not even under the New, because it hadn't been ratified yet. So.
Okay, this is wait one for another. The word wait, how did you translate that?
I had wait for.
Well, I don't understand what that even means, really.
It's ek dekomai. Dekomai is to receive with expectation. All right? And so, and this is ek dekomai. This is an emphatic form. You expect and you wait for them. You're expecting them to all be there. It's an expectation. Dekomai. And that's what Thayer says, to receive or accept, to look for, expect, or wait for, or wait. So we're waiting for everyone to get here. And so I think they were to wait until they all got together. And you don't just partake of it one at a time and just scatter it around all over the assembly. Everyone waits, and we try to get everybody there. I think it's a collective act that we all do together, one for another, and that's Allah long, and that's those that are of the same nature, so their fellow Christians were waiting on them. Now, if everyone brought their own fruit of the vine and unleavened bread, and it seems from this passage this was happening, some might have been eating the Lord's Supper before the others arrived. That's a possibility. That would fit in with what I see here happening. He's not telling them not to bring your own fruit of the vine or bread, but I think the love for a brother who has nothing, that I would share mine with him if I've got plenty. All right, doesn't that make sense? So the richer ones would share with the poor ones because of their love for them. Okay. Paul was instructing them to eat the Lord's Supper all at the same time when everyone came together. So that's what we should do. I know of some places where they take the cup and they all hold it, and everybody drinks it together.
Yeah, trying to figure out what this means, yeah.
And I don't fault them for doing it. I don't think that's the only way you can do it to be scriptural, but I'm not gonna get in a tiff with them. If I go to a congregation and visit and they do that, I'll just keep my mouth shut, because I don't think they do anything wrong. Just leave it alone, okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right? And so I don't think there'd be anything wrong with doing it that way. I'm not saying we ought to, but I'm saying I wouldn't get in an argument with someone over it. Wherefore, my brethren, when you come together to eat, wait one for another. That's how I try to say it, pretty much like the Americans say. 34, is this our last verse in this chapter?
Yep.
All right. Let's read, Jared, you do last, okay?
No, that's my turn.
Okay.
Heyday, Tis, Pina, In, Wiko, Es, Theto, Hina, May, Ace, Krima, Sunir, Case, Thay, Ta, Day, Loi, Pa, Hos, On, Eltho, Dia, Tabsomai. And I put, but if a certain one might be hungry, eat at home, so that you might not come together toward judgment. And the other things I will set in order whenever I may come.
Okay. Maybe my interpretation is wrong, but I take this view that he's saying eating the Lord's Supper is not about taking care of your hunger and thirst. It has another purpose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, eating a regular common meal in the assembly is supposed to be a holy thing. You're supposed to be worshiping. And so eating a common meal in the assembly just can't be right. I mean, they should understand that. But eating a meal after the assembly, and I've so many people say, no, you cannot eat in the church building, that it's a building. It's not the church, and that you just can't do that because this is what that says. No, it doesn't. In the assembly, you're worshiping. You're not eating a common meal or doing anything else common.
Well, here's the situation. They didn't even have church buildings back then.
No.
And they were meeting in the homes of brethren.
Or in the
You know what I
riverbanks.
suspect happened? I think there may be some implication of it in the so-called love feast. I think when they came together, the wealthier ones would bring food for the slaves that would come that were Christians. They'd all eat it together and enjoy the fellowship of one another.
Yeah, kind of like we do in our deal. We have the assembly. After the assembly, we have our meal and stuff, and we share. Everything is shared, And they would have to have done that.
If someone comes in and didn't bring anything, we invite them to stay, and we let them know that they shouldn't be embarrassed. Okay. So, anyhow. Okay. But I think they were meeting in the homes of the brethren at that time.
Or riverbanks or all kinds of places.
But when they met, if they met in a Christian's home, there wasn't anything wrong with him eating a meal after they got through to worship. And if he wanted to invite all the brethren to stay, if he was rich, and he might just say, everyone say, I'm going to feed everybody. Well,
And if you had a house big
nothing
enough
wrong
for the
with
church
that.
to meet in it, you'd had to have been fairly wealthy, other you wouldn't have a house big enough.
Yeah.
Their houses weren't very big anyway.
Yeah. Unless you were wealthy.
Yeah.
Okay. If any man is hungry, so if he's in the state of hungry, this is not, the Lord's Supper is not about taking care of your hunger and thirst. I think this demonstrates that they were making the Lord's Supper to a common meal to satiate their hunger, perhaps like the Passover meal.
Yeah.
And I can see a Jewish Christian could make it that way very easily because he's steeped in the Passover meal. as a meal.
Yeah, and
Even
so,
with that Passover meal, he still was satisfying his hunger and thirst, but he was honoring God too, I think. And so I can see how a Jewish Christian could easily be drawn into that thinking.
he hadn't unpacked that bag yet.
And then pack that bag in. It's for the purpose to remember the Lord's death until he comes, verse 26. It is possible that they were carnally minded, did not see the spiritual significance of the Lord's Supper also. That's a possibility. And of course, I think there's probably a mixture of people, or some strong.
That's the ones that are asleep, probably.
Yeah. So I think there's a mixture of people with different backgrounds. A common meal in the building. Same building that the church worship in, because they assemble in private homes. And we today will have a water fountain, and so eat and drink, we'll drink out of the water fountain. And nobody objects to that. And someone said, well, we don't have a water fountain, we have a little container holding water. Well, it's the same thing. It's not a fountain. Okay. So we're going to drink some water. You're thirsty. And the preacher may take some water up there because his mouth gets dry and he's preaching.
Song reader.
Yeah, or song leader might do it too. I don't think that in that case. Right. Let him eat at home in the house. So that you're coming together, be not unto judgment. So again, I'll get back to what they were doing apparently was making it a common meal, taking something that's holy and using it for a profane purpose. There's nothing wrong about eating a common meal. It's profane, and it's just food. But I'm not to make the Lord's Supper into a common meal. Now, I believe I must give thanks for my food, right? And of course, that, in a sense, makes it holy, doesn't it? Here, Paul is referring to eating the common meal at home and not making the Lord's Supper into a common meal. He's not telling the church to eat the Lord's Supper at home. Now, wait a second. Have they not houses to eat and drink in?
For the common meal.
Yeah, I see. So if we have, don't you have houses to eat and drink in, then he's not talking about eating and drinking the Lord's Supper at your house, but the common meal. That's why I say they were making it into a common meal. That's my conclusion. That makes sense? Any questions? The rest, the remainder, the other problems that you're having there at Corinth, I'm going to take care of when I come, okay? I set them in order, right? Whensoever I come. Now, I want you to notice here right on the bottom of your screen, I come, there's on again. That's that word that's untranslatable, that makes it contingent. He's not saying I'm coming, he's saying if I come and when I come. In the situation when I come. And so.
And I put whenever I may come,
Yeah.
just to make it, because he'd been told, no, he didn't get to go before.
Yeah. And also, he, like everyone else, didn't know that whether he'd be alive tomorrow or not. So he may intend to come, but die. Okay, so that could happen. So we had no promise of tomorrow. We just need to be right today, living right. Right? If any man is hungry, let him eat at home, that you're coming together, be not unto judgment, and the rest will I set in order whensoever I come. All right, let's get into some dilemmas here that are posed by the same building. The church was also told that they had houses to drink in as well. But we have water fountains in the building, okay? Verse 22. If Paul is forbidding the Christians to eat a common meal in the house building, church building, then the Corinthians worshiped in a church building. But they did not worship in a church building. We don't have any evidence that they did. They didn't have church buildings, so sometime later. Paul was not forbidding the Corinthians to eat a common meal in a church building. Okay. If he forbid them to eat a common meal in the place where they had assembled, if making the place where they assembled made it sacred so that they couldn't eat, and if they ate in Philemon's, and I think Philemon probably had the church in his house, from the book of Philemon, and so then Philemon can't eat a common meal in his own house. So you got a problem there. So if Paul was forbidden, here's another argument, to eat a common meal in the building where they worship, and they worship in a private residence, the Christians may not eat a common meal in a private residence where the church is worship, where the church worshiped. Paul was forbidden, and so we make that argument. Christians eat a common meal in the building where they worship. I'm like that. I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying that's their argument. Then Christians cannot eat a common meal in a private residence where the church worships. In this case, they worship in Philemon's house. Now he can't eat anymore in his house. Okay, no, I don't believe that's right. That's not reasonable. Okay. Nobody that has the church meet in their house, because now they can't eat a meal in their house. Okay, could they even sleep in their house if it made it holy? I don't know. I don't go too far. I mean, these are my reasons for rejecting that view. Okay, any questions? They just make the Lord's Supper to a common meal, and that's the problem he's addressing. All right. Implication. Aquila and Priscilla were both commanded to eat in their own home, 1 Corinthians 11:34, and forbidden to eat in their own home, 1 Corinthians 11:22, because the church met in their home, Romans 16:3-5, and 1 Corinthians 16:19. So we got a contradiction here. Aquila and Priscilla were commanded to eat in their own home, if there's supplies to them, yet the church met in their home, so now they can't eat in their own home, which they've been commanded to eat in the place that they can't eat in. So we get a contradiction. It becomes contradictory, and so this shows that it's not true. The view is not true.
And it's in the word coming together,
Yeah.
assembly.
Same can be said of Nymphus, Colossians 4:15, and Philemon 1:1 and 2. Okay. So these are my arguments for it. And so I don't believe it's wrong in the building. It is wrong to make it a Lord's Supper meal. Okay. Any questions? Anybody? References on head coverings, and these are bibliographic references. We slide this over. We have the abuse of spiritual gifts. Something new now. So I don't know, how much time do we have?
6 minutes.
About 6 minutes. I want you to come down to later verses down here. Give me a Bible, if you would.
I just have the interlinear.
I have this. All right, I'll scroll down. We'll come back to verse.
Put it up on my phone if you want.
No, it's all right.
All I have is the interlinear. To me, it's preferable. It's not all I have. Sure. Five minutes.
All right, verse 4. I want you to notice something here, starting in verse 4. He puts the spiritual gifts into 3 categories. All right. Aware of that. All right. Start in the next verse. Differences of administration, but the same Lord. So we'll have to get into that. All right. Right. The first category of the gifts begins in verse 7. Okay? So he sets out the first category of gifts. I'll show you why I know it's different categories in just a minute. Where it is. Verse says, for one is given to the Spirit of word of wisdom, and to another. Now I want you to notice the word that's translated another. Another is allos. Right? Right there. Right? That's the dative instrument locative form of allos. That's another, excuse me, a hiccup, that's another of the same nature. Right? Is the word of knowledge, another of the, right? Verse 9, to another, that's heteros. Look at verse 9. He used a different word for another. So this is a different category. So he used heteros twice. He used another repeated over and over. When he used another, it's in the same category. So he has a subdivision. He subdivides them with heteros. And incidentally, these happen to be the same three categories of chapter 13. Okay. And that'll help us to see on the end of miracles. All right, any questions? I just thought I'd let you see that. So when you're going to it, just be sure and look for it. I will go back to verse. Do this. I'm just going to record it.